To start the build off, we're going to prep and paint the body. I'm marking off all of the mold lines so I know where they are located, and I can use the permanent marker as a guide code to see when they are gone. Once they have all been located and marked with a permanent marker, I can move on to sanding them off with the sanding sticks. This is the rough work, and later on, after I've removed all of them with the sanding sticks, I'm going to refine this with a sanding sponge from Tamiya 600 grit to get rid of those deeper scratches and also give the rest of the body a nice sand as well so that the primer sticks to it a lot better. With the entire body now nicely sanded, all of the mold lines removed, I can move on to scribing out the panel lines. Most of them are nice and deep already, but just to be sure, I'm scribing them out a little bit more to make them a little bit deeper and try to avoid getting them all filled up with paint in the clear coating stage. The rear spoiler piece could also be glued onto the body prior to paint, so that was put in place. There were a couple of markings in the front bumper where you can glue canards on, but this kit does not have the canards, so I can't glue them on, so those needed to be filled. I just put in some super glue, sanded it smooth, and then removed all of the dust from the body before moving it into the booth for some first coats of primer. With the first coat now applied, I checked over the body to find any mistakes or spots that needed to be fixed. I couldn't really find them, so I just moved on to the second and final coat of primer before letting it sit and dry and sanding it entirely smooth with some 2000 grit sanding sponges from Tamiya to get it as smooth as it possibly can before moving on to the color application. The primer has now been sanded nice and smooth. I removed all of the dust from the body and moved back into the paint booth to start on the color. I chose a color from Porsche itself. I really like the color and I figured it would look good on this build. So first of all, as usual, the hard to reach easy to forget spots, and then a light coat on the rest of the body as well. The color wasn't really covering as well as I expected it to, so I let it sit and dry for about 10 minutes in between coats, and in total I applied 4 coats of color, getting a nice even coverage and not putting it on too thick and risking of ruining the plastic. So I'm just taking my time and applying an extra layer instead of one too little and just ruining the entire paint job. The 4th coat has been applied and I'm happy with the coverage, so I moved on to applying a couple of decals, one on the front, one on the rear, and I also glued in a couple small pieces for the quick release latches on the trunk and also on the hood as well. With that all done and out of the way, I'll let that dry for a couple minutes as well before applying a couple coats of clear. The first coat of clear went on really nicely. It's already starting to shine up as I wanted it to be. I could have just left it at this, but I was not really happy with a couple of spots, so I decided to add a second coat to finish it off. After applying the second coat, I quickly checked over the body and wasn't really happy with the coverage on the roof, so I added an extra coat, and that was pretty much it for the clear coat stage.